everyone, and welcome to MedEdge. I'm Marcus Grimm. Quick reminder that MedEdge is brought to you by Medtrics. Medtrics is the preferred student residency and medical education engagement platform for both UME and GME. Learn more about Medtrics at medtricslab.com or from my frequent co-host, Medtrics CEO Santosh Cherian, but not today. Tosh is off on this one. You know, if you're a medical student, or even if you work in medical education, there really is nothing bigger than match day. The NCAA brings us March Madness, but let's face it, that's child's play. They spread out all that excitement over several weeks. That's not the case with match day. In one single day, thousands of medical students learn not just what their specialty will be, but where their residency will take place. Meanwhile, the UME community gets to celebrate the placements of those students, and GME gets to welcome their next generation of residents. In one day, lives are forever changed. And of course, at the core of all this are real people, real medical students whose lives have been profoundly changed by what happens on match day. Real students like the one we're going to be speaking with today. As part of our partnership with MDplus, an online community for aspiring physician innovators, we are thrilled to be bringing you a series of these stories, part of our MedEdge Future series. And in this series, we're going to be speaking with medical students that have just received word about their match. Today on our program, we're speaking with Richard Lisi III. Richard, welcome to MedEdge.
Marcus, thank you so much for having me on the program this morning. Very excited.
We are thrilled to have you with us. Now, just to give the listeners a little context, we're going to be doing several of these over the next few weeks. But in fact, Richard is the very first one to come on the program. So number one, you'll always get to say that you were the first one to share your story on MedEdge. Now, we're recording this just days after the big day, but we're going to build up to that reveal. Where are you from? Where do you call home?
Yeah, so for me, I was actually born and raised in the small city of Providence, Rhode Island, a small state in the Union, and my home is a small section of a city called Cranston, called Knightsville, and that's where I lived for pretty much my whole life.
Terrific. I've been up in Providence, beautiful city. Now, coming out of undergraduate, so this goes back a few years, you applied to med school. Just talk to us about that decision. Was there something that from the get-go, is there medical professionals in your family? What caused you to apply to med school in the first place?
Yeah, absolutely. And, Marcus, let me just kind of start this off by saying, I was really excited to come on this podcast because I think my story is one of having an extremely different vision at the beginning of, probably my 18-year-old or 21-year-old life in the beginning of medical school to coming out to a completely different outcome. I guess it all starts for me. My family's first-generation immigrants from Italy. No one in my family actually went to college. I was a first-generation college student. And really growing up, I had no educational role models. I had folks out if I want to go be an electrician, a plumber, a carpenter. But no one really in the field of medicine. And so for me, that was, I think, a blessing in a way because it really gave me a lot of creativity and freedom to, pursue my interests. And for me, really, medicine came down to a vocation, I would say. I was born prematurely at 28 weeks. And I kind of grew up having, profound respect for the physicians and NICU nurses that, I felt saved my life. And, when I turned 18, I said, hey, wouldn't that be a great way to give back to, the very folks that I felt had a big impact on me? So that was really what set my pursuit from age 18. I was pre-med from day one. And I actually went through a series of different, changes and iterations throughout my undergraduate. So as one example, I did my undergraduate at the University of Rhode Island, and they actually had a joint program between URI and Brown Medical School. And so when I was a sophomore, I actually applied into this program. I was selected for the interview process, at which point I was actually denied. And as you can imagine, at 20 years old, the opportunity not to take the MCAT, that was, it was pretty gutting, to say the least. But everything happens for a reason. And, that was just one pit stop on my journey. I wasn't going to let deter me. And, I decided to, study for the MCAT, really devoted myself to that, put together my application, and I ended up gaining acceptance into Robert Wood Johnson Medical School in 2019. And, as far as the specialty goes, my father was a carpenter, And so the field of orthopedics was one that always, appealed to me. I did plenty of shadowing. And so I kind of went in guns ablaze to do orthopedics. But, as we'll get into my story, I completely went off the rails. And, yeah.
Let's go back there for a moment, because not getting into the program, that's a little bit like that could be a small speed bump, or it could be a big deterrent. You kind of acted like, well, my dinner showed up a little bit late. Like, is that how you're wired, or was there a period in there where you're like, wow, maybe I need to rethink things?
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. This is very, I think personal to myself, and in a way, like you said, the way I'm wired. I remember getting that email, and I was actually out working my summer job. So every year I worked with my cousin, who has a landscaping business, as well as, going out, and I did catering as well during my summers in college. And I remember it was the end of a hot day, and I'm like, oh man, I can't wait to get home. And I opened up my phone. I was, waiting for the email like in early May. And I was gutted. It was so, for a moment, very heart-wrenching, and I was filled with disappointment. But what soon filled me after was almost akin to, all right, I'll show you. It was almost a feeling of redemption that I needed to act upon, to say, hey, you passed over me once, and I'm not going to let you pass over me again. And I'm not sure where that drive comes from. You can call it a competitive spirit in a way. But that's something that I've always, been able to thrive upon. And as time has gone on, I've found myself thriving in, high pressure moments. And that was one where I realized I thought I was ready, but I actually wasn't ready for that process yet. So that was kind of my initial, I had the normal reaction of disappointment, and then I quickly processed it and said, all right, back on the horse, and like, let's make it happen.
That's a great story. I was reading an article last night. They were interviewing Peter Sagan, the professional cyclist, and he had a statement in there that, he actually felt like he grew more when he started losing some races. He said, you don't learn anything when you win races. It's when you lose. So same thing with you.
Absolutely. I mean, I 100% agree with that. I mean, there's no pain, there's no anguish when you win. It's only good feelings, It's only celebration. That does not cause as much growth as the pain and anguish of defeat. So,
right. So you mentioned that when you go to med school, then at the beginning you were kind of thinking orthopedics, but the journey changed for you over those few years. What was that like?
Yeah, so I would say first year medical school for me was a moment when I exited the tunnel. In other words, undergraduate was a mad dash to get into medical school, conquer the MCAT. And along all this time too, as I mentioned, I had been working jobs year round to pay bills, to get me through school. And so I basically never had a second to breathe or process anything. So, M1 comes 2019, later that year, we'd be deep in the COVID pandemic, which I didn't know. And I kind of stopped to smell the roses, if you will. And I said to myself, okay, I finally opened this door. I have the world in front of me as a future physician. What are my skills? What are things that I genuinely think I'm good at, and things that I think I could, use to my advantage? And as I started to dive into that question, which, my first year of medical school was very tumultuous in terms of my focus on different projects, my emotional state was up and down, because again, I now went from being, a rather big fish in a small pond, being at University of Rhode Island, which is my state school, to now, I'm with classmates from Harvard, Duke, all these top tier institutions. So there was a big feeling of imposter syndrome there that I knew how to push down, but it was still lingering. And so I started to kind of find outlets to say, all right, how can I get ahead? How can I stick out? And, one thing I definitely landed on was that I felt I had extremely strong business savvy and soft skills. And that was something that, I'd like to, devote to my father, who was a small business owner. I always grew up watching him talk to customers, how he treated his employees, how he was able to handle projects. I always kind of internalized that, that was a good skill to have and to develop. So as the year went on, I got a handle on my coursework. I started saying to myself, hey, how can I go down this pathway and start to make this a little more concrete, have something to speak from it? And so that landed me on two opportunities. The first one was that I actually sought out a startup out of Oakland, California called Elemental Health. And they were basically a cloud-based B2B platform, giving frontline staff ways to have information at their fingertips. They're at a Y Combinator, raising a Series A, and the founder was actually a PDICU doctor, Dr. Arup Roy Berman. And he brought me on. I had cold called him on LinkedIn, set up a call with him, and I got an internship there. So I started that piece. And while I was there, that was great business experience to start developing some of these soft skills, fundraising, things like that. But on the other side of it, I said, I want something a little bit more concrete. Internship's great, but what can I get any credentialing? So then I started looking into MBA programs. And it was at that time I applied to this new cutting edge technology focused MBA at NYU Stern, at which I gained an acceptance, and I was thrilled. This was after, I think, the beginning of my second year. I took my step one exam, and then a week later, I started my year off at NYU Stern. So everything happened in rapid succession.
And let's be clear too. This is also, if I'm tracking the timeline right, you're kind of navigating COVID through all this as well. So all these programs are, they're moving online, or they're doing this, or they're doing that. Wow, that's a fascinating couple of years. What can you tell me as we get closer now to applying for residency? We're going to come back. I love this MBA and the work that you've done in technology, but let's go back to the specialty. So now we get up to the point where you're thinking about what specialty programs to apply for. How does someone like yourself, as you're getting closer to that point, how did you begin to think about specialties and what types of specialties you want to apply to?
So here's the kicker, and here's the real hook and everything, is that my year at NYU was very life-changing in the sense that I felt myself actively develop differentiating skills such as product management, strategy, frameworks to produce business development. I actually ended up doing a consulting project for MasterCard during my fall semester, in which we did a full product discovery. I ended up presenting this to, boards of senior leadership, VPs, et cetera. And I said to myself, wow, I can feel myself having the ability to excel at this kind of work more so than I could in medicine.
Right.
At the time, I was like, wow, this comes easy to me. Why am I going to go through the racket of residency? So I actually, coming out of my MBA, I shelved clinical medicine. I applied to Boston Consulting Group, and I got a full-time offer coming out of my MBA program. And so my plan coming back to medical school was to not practice at all. And this is where it gets interesting going into today, and being matched and everything.
Yeah. So and it totally makes sense to me. But you decide to go through it. You decide to go through the match process, and is it one of those things that, well, you've made it this far, you may as well keep going, or how did you make the decision to say, I am going to apply for residency?
Definitely. So, being a fresh MBA graduate coming back to clinical year, my goal was really this: if nothing strikes my heart or swoops me off my feet, then it's not, the path I'm on is correct. So, I went through the gambit of all my rotations: internal medicine, psychiatry, OBGYN. And, through the first half of the year, I was like, man, nothing is sticking. Thank God I have this consulting offer. 'Cause right now I'd be in a panic, what the hell am I going to do with my life that's fulfilling? And it's not this, But it's funny the way life works out, because I got to one of my second to last clerkships, which is my surgery clerkship. And, I remember saying, oh man, surgery, the 80-hour work weeks, the abrasive personalities, man, this is gonna suck. This is not going to be fun. And, and thankfully, I found the opposite. And one of the first things that stuck out to me on my surgery clerkship were the anesthesiologists. They were some of the most welcoming, friendly people. And, funny how life works out is that I was in a case one day, and one of my now mentor, Dr. Michael Richardson, one of the anesthesiologists down at Princeton Health, he's like, hey, he's like, grabs me there. He's like, so you're a third year? And I'm like, yeah. He's like, so what do you want to do? And at the time, I kept my consulting very under wraps because, attendings are grading you and you don't want to sound like you're doing something, really off the beaten path, right? So I always put out like, I'm still deciding, maybe internal medicine, and he's like, but you're almost done with your third year. He's like, what else do you need to see? And he kept, I kept backing him up, like, yeah, I'm still, he's like, listen, he's like, he pulled me aside after the case. He's like, listen, he's like, I'm very concerned about you because you're very non-committal. And at this point in the game, you need to commit to something. And I was like, hey, thanks, but no thanks. Like, I'm good, like, don't worry about, like, I'm good. Don't worry about me, And so, I actually, through the MDplus community, I went to this AI medicine conference. I was selected to go, in June of that year after all my clerkships were done. And so this was the pivotal event. I went to this conference and I actively saw, the chief clinical officer at Google Health. I saw the president-elect of the AMA, all these leaders who were in tech-adjacent leadership roles in healthcare, exactly where I wanted to be. A pivotal point of every single one of their leadership statuses and presentations and talks was, you should not listen to me because I'm X. You should not listen to me because I'm Y. You should listen to me because I'm a board-certified radiologist, anesthesiologist. And so, I'm sitting in the crowd and I'm like, am I making a mistake here? Like, go ahead doing the consulting first and not getting my board training. So that, my fiance was with me, we were down in San Diego, and she was also very worried of me not going to residency either. And so I came back and I said, Christina, you're going to kill me. And she goes, you want to go to residency? And I'm like, yeah, I think so. So Dr. Richardson actually, he was persistent. He gave me his phone number. He said, if anything changes, you call me. And so I called him that very day. I said, Dr. Richardson, listen, we're 4 months out from ERAS. I have done nothing. I have no letters of recommendation. And the more I thought about it, what fit my personality and my aspirations was anesthesiology. And I said, can you help me make this happen? Because I'm screwed. I don't have anything. Like it's June and the application's due in September. I had nothing. Right. And so he's like, oh God, he's we worked very, very furiously to pull this off and to make this happen. And we spoke at length about crafting my application and what I wanted out of the program, so we can kind of go into that a little bit more as well. That was kind of the very dynamic journey that has now led me into anesthesiology.
That's amazing. And kudos to Dr. Richardson. I mean, what a story. We always talk about, the mentorship and the leadership. And what I love about that is here's someone like Dr. Richardson who clearly has a very full plate for himself. And he noticed, like, if he doesn't poke you at a certain point, we're probably not having this conversation.
Exactly.
That's great. So now we very quickly, we get up to the application process. So I guess the first thing I have to ask you is, you've got to rank specialties, right? So clearly anesthesiology was number one. Did you just say not interested in anything else, or how many programs and specialties did you end up applying to?
My mentality was this: I was going to be an anesthesiologist or I was not going to practice, because I had felt so strongly about the flexibility that the field affords, as well as the type of work. It was very physiology heavy. Also had a great degree of risk management and strategy, which were core skills I learned from my MBA program. As well as the personalities and, not really having room for egos in medicine. That was also very, very important to me. I did not feel strongly about any other specialties at all. And I said, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this my way. And those are my terms. So I said, I'm only going to apply to anesthesia. The other very risky thing I did was I felt so strongly about, the power of name brands. As I had learned at Stern, that Stern name had carried with me throughout all the opportunities I was involved in. For when I was at the program, after the program, even during the application process for residency. And so I said, I have two kind of non-conditionals, or conditionals, I should say. I wanted another name brand program to add on to my resume, to complement all the stuff I had done. And I also just wanted to be well-rounded in my training. So in other words, I did not want to go on to pursue a fellowship. I wanted to do my 4 years and feel like I had enough training to go into any job market that I needed to go into.
Right.
So this, for me, along with some location considerations, landed me at about 30 programs that I ultimately applied to.
Wow. That, and I'll tell you what, I mean, what I really love about your story is you've done a really great job, I think, about looking at yourself and saying, okay, where am I strong? What am I interested in? What are my passions? What's going to make me satisfied? And that's very, very well thought out. So 30 programs. So one specialty, 30 programs.
Mm-hmm.
Now we move on to the interview process. How many did you go on, and what I'm really looking for this next part of the program? Your story has just been so much fun, and I think the first thing that we've learned for all the faculty and medical administrators that pay attention to this program is what Dr. Richardson did for you. Like that's one person who just totally changed your career. But now, what I want to get a feel for as you're going through this application process. Now you start going on the interviews, and now I think is the part where our listeners can also learn like what happened during the interview process that made you feel good or made you feel bad about, because it's a two-way street, right? You're trying to match with them, and they're trying to see what you're all about. Tell us about that interview process. How many you went on? What did you learn? How informative were they for you in your decision-making process?
Honestly, I think this was kind of a culmination of all of, every move I made in my life was to try to give me some sort of strategic or competitive advantage. And this was a big, big lesson that I learned that a lot of medical students, hopefully if any M1s or M2s are listening, kind of remember these words, that this is a process that definitely tends to the risk averse. And I will kind of get into that. As you know, this anesthesia cycle was extremely competitive. So just to give some numbers on the match rates, 2 years ago, we were sitting pretty in the 90% match rate, around there, 92, 96%. Last year, because of the increasing competitiveness, has dropped down to 83%. The new 2024 match data has now shown that anesthesiology matched 70% this year, which is almost akin to some surgical subspecialties. I actually think it's, don't quote me on this, but it's more competitive than like ENT surgery. So that just shows to the hotness of the market how attractive the specialty is. So obviously the year I decide to apply is cutthroat, in terms of competition. Just another thing, another hat on my journey, right?
The year you decided is cutthroat, and you decide to hop into the pool about yesterday.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. So, and again, this goes back to the strategic plan I crafted with Dr. Richardson was this. I really wanted to emphasize, my tech MBA, all my entrepreneurial strengths, and what I wanted to do for the field. And I realized that may be something that is pretty abrasive to typical academic positions. But at the end of the day, I would end up being in a program that not only respected me, but then I respected in return because they valued what I bring to the table. Right. So it was definitely a high risk, high reward strategy. And the other component to consider in all this too is, this is something I learned in my negotiation class at Stern. You always need a best alternative to negotiation. So when you're making a decision, for a lot of medical students, and this is what I want to hone in on, they are risk averse. In other words, I would rather rank X program that I'm miserable at because it will leave me jobless. Whereas I had a very, very different approach. I said I would rather apply here or go to BCG and get what's akin to a physician's salary, right? So I had a phenomenal backup option that I afforded myself through all the risks I took through taking a year off and going to school and So throughout this process, I actually only landed 3 anesthesia interviews in what was a cutthroat year, which makes this all so much more thrilling. As you can imagine. And those 3 interviews were Yale, Brown, and Lahey Clinic.
Okay, I'm going to ask you about all 3 of those in a minute, but I do want to go back to something you said there because I've never heard this from I've never heard something what you just shared with me. This idea of being bold and stating this is who I am. This is what Richard Lisi is all about, and that's okay if it's not a fit for you. You know, one of the terms that I often use in marketing with my clients is the best marketing divides the room, and I love the fact that you kind of divided the room. If you don't want this brand of Richard Lisi, it's okay. I want to work with people who do. Great story to apply to that situation. So you, 3 interviews. So walk us through them, and were they all the same, or as were they very surprisingly different?
So I would say that each interview had its own, flair, its own personality, its own spin, right? And and again, like with the classes I had taken at Stern, I was very cognizant of, okay, organizations are not, things in a vacuum. They're people that make conscious choices. They consciously select other folks to come and join their program, right? So I could kind of tell a sense or vibe of who are the faculty, how are they like, what kind of questions were they asking me, how did they perceive the things I had done, were they impressed, were they not impressed? And where did they view me fitting into like their whole puzzle, right? And I would say that for, from Yale to Brown to Leahy, at a baseline, they're all pretty even keel in terms of the anesthesia experience, asking me about my goals. I realized that at programs like Yale and Brown, they were very interested in what I wanted to do while I was there. Where did I see my career aspirations going? Brown for me was very, very, I should say, impactful and emotional, because that's my home program. I mean, that's the hospital I was born in, was right next door, women and infants. So that was also where I had gotten rejected from medical school, 9 years prior. So, going back to the day of landscaping, when I said, I'm going to show you, I did show them, like I brought that to fruition. But, really at the end of the day, again, it's emphasizing, when you think about these interactions, and, this is something I'm not very fond of with the match system. It's really, it's a power dynamic I'm not fond of. And,
right.
I always try, in the back of my head, I always said to myself, I need to put myself in a position where I don't expose myself to risk and I retain some degree of control. So in other words, if a program, is one in which maybe won't treat me well, again, a lot of cause of burnout, physician suicide, and some other dark things that go on in medicine the public isn't really aware of, is a cause, direct effect of that anti-competitive, anti-labor setup, in which a resident goes to one program and then they are not able to leave. That is not found in any other, labor system. And it creates a huge power dynamic. So again, it was kind of this thing where it's like, I talk to programs, as an individual, not as someone that I was relying on them to accept me, but hey, I want to collaborate with you and bring great things to this program. And that definitely changed the mindset you go into with some of these interviews, because you're able to exude more confidence. You're able to exude a game plan that programs can understand and relate to and say, yeah, I want someone like that being a part of this institution and, potentially going on to be a leader.
You're sharing a lot of things with us that I don't, I'm a little bit surprised to hear from someone who's just going into residency. Your awareness of the business realities of the profession, of the challenges with physician burnout. Do you feel that holistic perspective, is that common among people like yourselves, or did you kind of get that through these other experiences? It seems like you're kind of good at periodically taking a step back and saying, what's the big picture here?
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely say that a lot of my adjacent experiences influence that. But I would also say that that's kind of akin to, like, I guess my personality and the way I approach situations. I would say that the common thing I experience with a lot of my colleagues is that, almost akin to how I was in undergrad, folks have tunnel vision, right?
Yes.
So all they see is that end goal, right? But I'm always constantly thinking about the downstream effects of that end goal. Where does that put you 5 to 10 years? What are risks that you're exposed to? What are challenges you're going to face, right? And I guess that is a strategy heavy business mindset as well. But I think if more students kind of stop to smell the roses, as I said earlier. I think you start to really pick up on some of those things, and some of them you just unfortunately have to deal with because that's the system that we're currently working in. But I also would say a lot of that is changing because we're seeing a lot of rise in resident unions. Programs are now emphasizing more resident favored terms, like increased vacation days, pay raises, moonlighting. But it's really tough because there's certain specialties where it's like you'd be lucky to even just match in the specialty, let alone have your pick. And I think that selection challenge is where you run into a lot of these issues with being in a situation that you're forced into with a program that knows that you're forced into it. So again, there's a power dynamic there that I'm not very fond of.
Right. So now we get to the point that you have to do rank order, which that's one of the simpler things for you to do compared to everything that we've talked about, because relatively short list, right? But talk to me about the rank order. What you've got 3 great programs there. Was there an element that you were like, you know what, I'm thrilled with any of these 3, or just talk about how you decide to put together that rank order list?
Yeah, and honestly, you hit the nail on the head. That was the best outcome for me, in which I was thrilled with any of those. Actually, my goal was to get back closer to my family. My grandparents are in their 90s, they're aging, and I wanted to be close. Being a 3-hour drive has been a little bit problematic. So, even being an hour and a half away in New Haven would have been great. But honestly, I think it really came down to, for me, what was going to be a new challenge, what was going to be a new adventure. I've taken such a joy in this journey and process of continually iterating myself, improving myself, experiencing new things, new challenges, and I never wanted to stagnate. And there was almost a part of me at the end of the day that felt that, Brown, as phenomenal as a program as it is, and I would love to go there, I was going back to my comfort zone, being home.
Sure. Right.
And while that would have been great from a personal standpoint, professionally, is that something, that I really wanted for myself? And so that, I love my interview and I love my program. And, that's ultimately, the spoiler alert for the viewers, it's where I'm going. And I'm extremely, extremely excited about it. But, in approaching my rank list, I kind of wanted something that was going to, be a new adventure. And combined with the fact that, Brown is a 3-year advanced, Yale is a 4-year, Yale ultimately ended up at the top of my list. But it was funny because I went to a second look for Brown in February. And I met Dr. Malgieri, my program director, and all the residents there. And I was like, I had buyer's remorse. I was like, shoot, I really should have just said screw it and just ranked them number 1, because that was what my gut was telling me the whole time anyways.
Yeah. But
here I am trying to, again, just challenge myself and do new things. And but then I said, I'm a believer in God, and God's going to sort this out for me. And he absolutely did. So that was kind of my approach to ranking.
That is awesome. This is so much fun. So now the work's done. Now you're in that waiting mode. You've got that BCG opportunity in your back pocket. So has it been a pretty calm? I mean, on one hand, I could say you've got a backup plan, so you're fine. On the other hand, you seem to be a guy who likes to be in control of his destiny. And now we go through a couple month period where it's like, well, now I don't. What's the past several weeks been like prior to match day?
Honestly, you hit the nail on the head again in terms of saying that, I am someone that likes to be in the driver's seat, I guess. And, it was a time where I was able to keep cool and collected, but, I think 3 interviews didn't make anyone nervous. And while I had a great backup opportunity, I did come to fall in love with the field of anesthesia, through my elective rotations and such. And I think there would be a part of me that, mourned the death of, the clinician I had grown, to love and to be molded into. And so, I would say that throughout February, not much going on. I also kept myself busy with, last minute requirements for school. But really for me, Monday of match week was the big day, because that was the yes or no answer.
Yeah. Right.
So, it's like 8:50 a.m. I went nervous food shopping because, I like to cook, and I said, I'm going to make something nice that day. And I poured myself a nice cup of coffee. And, the email comes out at 9 a.m. And so I'm pouring my coffee at 8:57 and I get the Gmail and it says, congratulations, you matched. And my fiance was around the corner. And so I don't know if you're familiar with the Celtics, but I'm a huge Celtics fan. And there's this shot of Jason Tatum after he hits the game winner against the Nets in 2022 when he's like, his arms are up and that was me right around the corner. And I was like, Christina, and I'm screaming to my fiance and, and she was like, well, and it was such an emotional moment because yet again, I felt vindictive. In other words, I went against the odds, another time and it worked out in my favor. And I'm almost thinking to myself, how many lottery tickets am I going to hit here? But I think there's also something to be said about, taking high risks in a calculated way and hoping it pays off,
And it definitely did. And it's interesting then, because I'm guessing then when a few days later you find out it's brown, was that almost a calmer thing? Because you knew like whatever you got that day, you'd be happy with, but what was that like to find that out that it was brown?
Yeah. And I think this is a part of, maturing and growing up for myself. And, I'm getting married in September. I have my fiance with me. And, a big part of this decision was taking her, her situation, her feelings into it as well. And, as much as I wanted to go to Yale as a challenge to myself, as a new adventure, there's a part of me that said, I had met my fiance Christina at the University of Rhode Island. That was both where we met, both where we were comfortable. And I said, you know what? Who knows what's going to happen during residency? If we have kids, if we have, whatever challenges come our way, I think it would be nice for her to have a support system if I'm maybe, tied up at the hospital and, at least my parents are there, my grandparents. So there was a part of me that's, was going to be happy with either situation, but I think I would have felt better for my family if I'd matched up brown. And so, opening the envelope, I was, I couldn't, I still can't put it into words. That's how much, excitement and joy it brought me. And I'm still processing it now, because a lot of the folks that I know from home now know that I'm going there, and there's a lot of joy and excitement. And, there's something to be said about being able to go home and treat, and take care of folks that personally, people from your community. And just going back there in a different lens now as a physician, knowing the medicine I know, I don't know, it's really hard to articulate,
That's phenomenal. Now, your process has been, and I personally, you did it like I think you built a process that really made sure that you were making the right decision for you and your loved ones. For any of the GME programs that are listening to this, what can they take out of this? What can these programs be doing more, if anything? Because I really think you've really curated a personal experience for yourself. But as you think about some of these programs, and maybe it's from some of the experiences you had from doing clinical projects, but what can these programs be doing more to be more attractive to someone like yourself, if anything?
I think at the end of the day, right, I think a big part of what attracts certain talent, certain individuals to your organization, and, residency programs are no different, is being very cognizant, A, of the internal dynamics, power dynamics, resident culture, and B, is realizing that, we are highly trained, educated professionals trying to go into the start of their apprenticeship, which will build a fruitful career. And I think it's extremely important to treat us as such. So in other words, you can't say, oh, we value resident wellness when, trying to get a week off for a vacation or a day off here and there is like pulling teeth, and again, these are only revelations you have when you see the outside. When you look at the larger corporate world, right? It's like people are treated in a way, very like correlated highly to the value they bring to an organization, and who generates more revenue in a hospital than residents,
Right.
on top of the money that is federally pulled in, there are revenue units that are generated. And I just think that a big part of this, yes, we are learners, but we are also professionals. And I think that value needs to be made very, very clear. Like, I know for me, That value is made very clear at all three of my programs. And we can get into a whole conversation about resident salaries and how, they really should be increasing with the cost of living, but that's a whole other can of worms, any GME listening. But yeah, look, here's, I'm a very direct person, and here's the reality. Okay. Student loans are as large as they've ever been. The cost of your dollar is going as slow and as least distance as it's ever gone. And so who are you going to attract with a $60,000 salary, no bonuses, no relocation bonuses? This money doesn't come out of thin air, and we like good feelings and we like all that, all that good stuff. But what we like is time off with our families and to be paid appropriately. And I think that is, imagine the type of talent you'd attract as a residency program. You said, hey, you know what? We're going to start our residents at $100K starting because that's what they're worth. That's the value we put on them.
Right.
I bet you that'd be turning some heads.
What are your thoughts right now? It's interesting to me that, even if we go back to just a handful of months, you were, well, if I don't do residency, I don't do residency yet. And now you're doing residency. So I'm curious, is Richard still saying, well, this is the path that I'm going to do for a few years so that I can go do the consulting thing? Or is this now a path in your road that it's, well, let's see what the next few years bring? And it sounds like, those soft skills, obviously they're valuable anywhere, right? So I'm just curious right now how you're thinking about Richard the physician versus Richard the consultant.
Yeah. So, it's funny because that was a big, driving force to me joining the MDplus communities, because I am not just a physician. I want to be a physician plus, right? And whether that's a physician entrepreneur, physician consultant, et cetera, those hats are always going to change. And in terms of the way that I view, BCG, I actually recently had a conversation with my office, and, one of the special things about a role of consulting is that they are very amenable and they're willing to work with you in terms of adding on education. And, my office was thrilled to learn that I matched up Brown. And so it's one of those things where it's there if I still want to pursue it later down the line, but by no means am I forced to go down that path. And I actually think that's a very liberating feeling to not know, hey, I signed an offer. I do have to go somewhere at the end of 4 years. And again, I do feel that in terms of my work in industry, and as someone that would love to be in a C-suite one day, as a physician leader, I do think that the consulting work is going to play a big role in, the learnings I take from projects, as well. Again, branding is very important. So I don't think it's off the table for me, but again, now this is a very exciting path. I'm going to be out to become an anesthesiologist, and I do want to be open to what it brings. So I'll kind of leave it at that.
Phenomenal answer. Now, presumably the next few months do look like a lot of paperwork. But any other, I assume you report in July, and any other plans? How are you going to be spending the next few months?
My fiance and I, we have to move down to Brick, New Jersey, down by the Jersey Shore for my intern year. And so we are looking at trying to buy a house. So that's the exciting thing we have coming up right now. And then besides that, we're getting married in September, and my bachelor party's in May, right after my graduation. So those are the two very fun things I have to look forward to right now. But it's also just about, this has been a 5-year journey. One that, again, I remember telling myself as a first year medical student, this is going to go by so quickly, and it has gone by so quickly. So I'm really just trying to be present in this moment, process all the things I've learned, how I've grown, and just try to develop some tangible strategic goals to accomplish over the next couple of years. And also just enjoy the process of finally being an adult, getting a house, getting my first big contract, I'd say outside of BCG, and, just starting to build my life. I think it's, it's a really, really great thing to be able to view from the outside.
Wonderful. Richard Lisi III, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been a lot of fun, and it's really just a phenomenal story. Congratulations to you.
Thank you, Marcus. Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Everyone, the handoff from medical school to residency, it is arguably one of the most critical junctures of a physician's life. Years of discipline and goals are distilled and fed into a system designed to match the gifts and desires of a candidate with the ever-changing needs of a healthcare system. And today's guest is a perfect example of those gifts and desires are unique for everyone, right? For today's interviewee, Richard Lisi III, that handoff's going to take place at Brown. You've been enjoying a special edition of MedEdge Futures, where we learn firsthand about the match day process through the lives of tomorrow's frontline physicians. MedEdge is brought to you by Medtrics, the premier student residency, faculty, and administration engagement program for both UME and GME. Learn more at medtricslab.com. For Santosh Cherian and everyone on the MedEdge team, I'm Marcus Grimm.